The man on my back was bleeding, and the thing in the dark could smell it. I had stopped keeping track of how long I had been running. My legs belonged to someone else. Each step drove a little more of his blood down my spine, warm at first, then cold. Each step, the smell of it spread, and whatever was pacing us through the black timber came a little closer to that smell. They had given me one rule the first day. Just one. Nothing that bleeds touches the water in that hollow. Nothing living leaves its blood on the ground or in the air. I had filed it under mountain talk. Salt over the door. Beans they would not plant in a waning moon. I was a doctor. I believed in anatomy and pressure, and the 4 minutes a torn brain has left. I did not believe the dark could smell a wound. The low sound came again off the ridge. Closer now. It had no bottom to it, and I felt it in the water of my own body before I heard it in my ears. That was when I understood the rule. Too late, the way the drowning understand water. The hollow had one rule about blood, because blood was how it found the living. The money found me in October. It found me the way it always had, at the worst possible time, and dressed up as a favor. I had been out of the army 11 years by then, out of anything I would call medicine for about 6. What I did instead was contract work for a company I never once named out loud in a sentence I was proud of. They pulled minerals out of mountains. Where minerals come out of a mountain, men do dangerous things for wages. And where men do dangerous things for wages, somebody eventually needs a person who can put a tourniquet on a crush injury at the bottom of a hole. That was me, corporate trauma medic. It sounds like a title. Mostly it was a truck, a jump bag, a satellite phone, and a good salary to sit and hope nothing happened. I was good at the part I hoped never came. I had earned the good, if good is the word for it. 2 tours of surgery in a tent with plywood over sand, where the generator quit in the middle of a laparotomy more than once. I learned my own hands in a place like that. I knew exactly what mine could do. I knew the one thing they could not, which was bring back the men who were already gone before they reached me. I kept a list of those. I never said it out loud. I carried it like a stone in my boot on a long march, and after enough miles the limp was just how I walked. The top of the list was a boy named Ochoa. He was 19. A vehicle had rolled on him outside the wire. By the time they got him to my tent, his belly was full of blood and his pressure was going. I opened him fast. I put my hands inside him and found the tear, and held it shut with my own fingers, while the plywood floor turned dark under my boots. I held it a long time, longer than made sense. There is a point where a surgeon knows, in his hands, the way I know a doorknob is cold before my brain says cold, and my hands had known about Ochoa for a while before I let myself stop. He had a picture of a dog in his breast pocket. Not a girl, a dog. A brown mutt with one ear up. I gave the picture to the chaplain. I washed my hands and went to the next one. And I have never once in 20 years been able to remember the dog's name, though Ochoa told it to me while I worked, talking the way they talk. To stay in the world. That was the shape of the list. Not the ones I lost on the table. The ones I lost with my hands already inside them, close enough to feel the exact second the body quit. I do not forget those. They live in the hands. On bad nights, my hands still close a little in my sleep, holding a tear shut in a boy who has been gone 20 years, and I wake with them cramped and cannot for a moment think why. I bring Ochoa up because of what the old man at the gate was going to say to me later about running to the hurt one. He read it off me like a chart. He was right. The reason he was right had a name and a dog and a rolled vehicle. What I did not know yet was that the hollow would make me choose, over and over, between the man Hiram warned me I was and the man I would have to become to walk any of us out. The call came on a Tuesday. A survey crew the company had put into a hollow had stopped answering. 6 men, a 2-week job, mapping a coal seam, and whatever else the ground was hiding. On the 9th day, the check-ins ended, not tapered off, ended between one scheduled call and the next silence. The company did what companies do. They waited 3 days in case it was a radio. They sent a smaller team to look. That team came back with one man and no answers. Then they started phoning people like me, the ones who go where the insurance says the last group should not have gone. I flew into a regional airport with one runway and a vending machine. A company man named Delacroix met me at the curb. He had a rented truck and a folder and the kind of clean that field money buys, pressed pale, looking at the tree line past the lot like it owed him something. "You are the medic," he said. Not a question. "I am the medic. You have done recoveries. I have done a lot of things." He did not like that. It told me most of what I needed to know about him. He handed me the folder and talked while I read. The survey crew's names meant nothing to me yet. The one survivor from the second search was a man named Vance. Delacroix said the name with a small warmth I noticed and set aside. I did not understand it until much later. Vance had come out of that second search dehydrated and in shock, and he had been talking about the first crew ever since. Animal attack. That was the phrase the company had settled on. I read it twice. It was doing an enormous amount of work. That phrase, the way a bandage does a lot of work over a wound nobody wants to look at. Animal attack, I said. That is the working theory. You have a working theory before you have bodies. Efficient. His jaw did a small thing. We have one body from the first search. That is why we are being careful about the second team. There it was. He had led with the survivor and buried the body, and I had almost let him. I closed the folder. "Show me where I am going." He showed me. The hollow had no name the state recognized. The company called it by a survey grid number that means nothing. The locals called it Blackwood Hollow. Dead Creek ran down the spine of it. The road stopped a long way short of where I needed to be, and past the road there was a gate. Delacroix tapped it on the map. An old iron thing. The company's easement gave them the legal right to open it, and the family that kept it had been, in his word, difficult. Difficult how? They do not want us in there. They have opinions about the hollow. Do their opinions have anything to do with 6 men not answering their radios? He looked at me like I had spoken a language he did not know. They are superstitious people. We are paying you to be a professional. I have been paid to be a professional in a lot of rooms. It has never once meant what the man saying it thought it meant. The rest of the team was staged at a motel 40 minutes from the trailhead. I met them that evening in a lot that smelled of diesel and wet leaves and the cold coming down off the mountains. 4 of us would go in. Me, a second medic, 2 company security men, and a guide the company had hired off the mountain because their own people could not read the ground. The second medic was Arthur, and that was where the trouble I should have predicted started. I had worked with Arthur the better part of a decade. The Army first, then twice on contracts. A lot of what happened turns on a man I understood better than I let myself admit. He was a good doctor, better with his hands than I was, in some ways. His sutures were prettier, his charts were cleaner. He had a mind like a well-kept ledger, and a coldness at the center of it that I had always read as discipline. I was wrong about that. I had been wrong the way I'm always wrong about a thing I have decided not to look at too closely. There was a history between us where I was always half a step ahead, an accident of rank and then of reputation. Arthur had spent years being gracious about it, and I mistook the grace for peace. It was not peace. It was a debt, and he was keeping it, and I did not know the ledger existed until it came due at the worst possible altitude. That first night he shook my hand and smiled and said, "It was good to work with me again." It was. Both of those things were true. Neither of them lasted. The young security man was Billy, 22, local, a rifle he loved and did not quite trust himself with. He studied the older men like he was waiting to be told he could stay. He told me inside 10 minutes that he had taken the job for his mother, who was sick, and that the company money beat anything on the mountain. He told me the way a young man says a thing when he needs one adult in a bad place to know why he is there. I liked him right away. I have thought about that more than I want to. There was nothing I could do with the liking. I have turned it over anyway, the way I press on a bruise to check that it still hurts. The other security man I will call Reese, and mostly leave out. Reese did his job and got out, and he does not deserve to be a character in what the rest of us made. Then there was the guide. He stood apart by his own truck. An old flatbed with a toolbox rusted into the bed, and he was not looking at any of us. He was looking up the road toward the mountains. The light was almost gone. There was a stillness to him I recognized. I had seen it in men who spent time somewhere that changed how they held their bodies afterward. He was not tall. He was worn down to rope and gristle. 50 or 60, hard to say, his face weathered by all of it. When Delacroix's local fixer waved me over, the guide shook my hand once, firm, dry. His gray eyes took a slow and complete inventory of my face. "Silas," he said, "good to meet you. They tell you what is in there?" "They told me animal attack." He did not laugh. He did nothing with his face at all, which was worse. "My brother was on the first crew," he said. "So I will say this once, and then you can call it whatever you have to call it to earn your check. There is no animal in that hollow. There is something older than animals. The old people put a gate across the neck of it a long time ago, for a reason, and your company is going to make us open that gate. When we do, you will want a man near you who knows the rules. That is why I am here, not for their money. People have said dire things to me my whole life. Most of them are performing. Silas was not. He briefed me the way I would tell a first-year resident that the patient was going to code in 4 minutes, and here is what we do when he does. It was not meant to scare me. It was a briefing. "What are the rules?" I said. "You learn the first one tomorrow, at the creek. The rest depend on whether you are the kind of man who can learn the first." Then he got in his truck and shut the door, and the conversation was over. I stood in the diesel dark with a folder full of a phrase that was doing too much work. For the first time since the money found me, I felt the old cold, the one I used to feel in the tent before a bad night. It lived at the base of the skull and had nothing to do with the weather. I told myself it was the altitude. I did not sleep well. The motel heater ticked. Around 0300, a time my body keeps whether I wanted to or not, I woke to the sound of it and lay there listening. For a long stretch, I could not have said what I was listening for. The mountains were out past the thin curtain, black on black. Somewhere in them were 6 men who had stopped answering. One gate, one rule I had not learned. I ran my numbers in the dark, the way I do. 4 minutes to the brain, 90 seconds to bleed out from a torn femoral. The cold facts that had carried me through the tent. They did not help. I did not yet know that where I was going, the numbers I had trusted my whole life were about to stop being true. The water was going to teach me a new one. We drove in at first light. The road up stopped being a road in stages. First the center line went, then the shoulder, then the pavement broke into gravel the mountain had been taking back for years, and the trees closed over the top until we drove through a green tunnel with the light coming down in coins on the hood. The hemlocks up there grew close and old. The canopy was so thick that even at mid-morning it was dusk beneath it. I have been in a lot of country. I had never been anywhere a living thing shut out the day that completely it was like driving down into a throat. The air changed when we dropped into the hollow. I could smell it through the vents before Reese put a window down. Wet earth, iron, and under that a mineral sharpness I learned later was the coal dust that lived in everything down there, in the soil, in the water, and the bark of the trees. The old mines had been closed for generations. The mountain had never gotten the dust back out of itself. It blacked the stones in the creek. It was in the mud of the road. Silas, in the lead truck, had told us to keep the windows up until we were down. When we asked why, he said the dust got into the lungs and the blood and did not come out. I took it for a miner's practical warning. I understood later he had meant it more completely than that. Dead Creek ran alongside the road once we were down in it. My first real look at the water stopped me, and I was not a man who was easy to stop. It was dark, not muddy, not runoff brown, a deep mineral black, as if the whole mountain had been dissolved into it, and it moved slow and heavy over stones that were blacker still. Where it pooled, it did not hold the sky. That was the part that got in first. Every water I had ever knelt beside gave back some version of the light above it. Dead Creek gave back nothing. I looked down into it and saw a hole cut in the world. My own face was not there. I told myself it was the coal. Suspended particulate, absorbing light. I had an explanation for everything down there. My explanations lasted right up until they didn't. We staged the trucks where the old survey road forked. From there, it was foot and pack. Silas gathered us and took a knee at the edge of the creek to lay the route out on a scrap of paper. That was where I first broke the rule. It was a small break. It saved my life, because it taught me the rule while the teaching was still cheap. My hands were black from loading. The dust was on everything. I knelt at the edge of Dead Creek without thinking, the way I would have knelt at any stream in any country, and I cupped my hands to wash them. Silas caught my wrists before my fingers broke the surface. He did not do it gently. His grip was a set of vice grips, all the softness worn off by decades of rope and cold. He pulled my hands back and held them there above the water. He looked at me, and every man in the group went quiet. There is a thing that happens in the body when one person seizes another. Everyone's nervous system reads it at once. "Not in the creek," Silas said. "My hands are filthy. I do not care if your hands are filthy. Nothing of yours goes in that water. Not blood, not spit, not the dirt off your skin. Nothing that came out of a living body goes in Dead Creek." "Why?" He let go of my wrist. He looked at the black water a moment. Then he looked back at me and said the thing I have not been able to get out of my head since. "The soil here is thirsty, and the water remembers. Put something of yourself in that creek, and it knows you. It knows the taste of you. There is a thing down in this hollow that has gone hungry a long time. It does not see well, it does not hear the way you think it hears, but it comes to the water, and once the water has the taste of a living body in it, the thing comes looking for where the rest of that body is standing." Nobody spoke. Somewhere up the hollow a bird made a sound and did not make it again. I wiped my black hands on my pants. I did it slowly, because I did not want Silas to see that my heart had jumped, and I did not fully understand why it had. There was no reason for a surgeon, a man who had held living hearts in his 2 hands, to be spooked by a story about hungry water. And I was. The flat certainty in the way he said it had gone in under the part of me that argued and lodged in the older part, the part that had kept my ancestors out of dark water for 100,000 years. "All right," I said. "Not in the creek." Silas nodded once, the way I close a chart. "You learned the first one. That is more than most of them do." His eyes went past me when he said it. I followed the look. It landed on Arthur, who stood at the back with his arms crossed and a small, patient, superior smile. The smile of a man watching other people believe in something he has decided he is above. I thought nothing of it. I thought Arthur was being Arthur, a little cold, a little vain, keeping his ledger. I did not know the smile was the first visible edge of the thing in him that would get people killed. And I did not know that Silas, who read men the way he read the ground, had already seen the whole of it and decided to keep it to himself and watch. We shouldered the packs and started up toward the gate. The light came down in coins. Dead Creek ran alongside, giving back nothing. I walked with my clean pants and my dirty hands, and the first rule sitting in me like a swallowed stone, and I did not look back at the trucks. I wish I had. I would like to say I took one last look at the ordinary world before I climbed up into the other one, but I was watching the ground the way Silas told me to, and the ordinary world closed up behind us as quiet as the water. The gate came up out of the hollow the way a wall comes up in a dream. Before I was ready, bigger than it had any right to be. We had climbed along the creek the better part of 2 hours. The walls of the hollow drew in the whole time, the 2 ridges leaning toward each other overhead until the strip of gray sky between them narrowed to the width of a road. The hemlocks thinned where the ground turned steep and rocky. Dead Creek narrowed and picked up speed, running white now over black stone, which was almost a relief. At least Whitewater gave back a little light. Then the hollow pinched down to a neck, a narrow gap where the whole drainage had to funnel through, and across that neck someone had built a gate. Iron, old, enormous. Wrought bars as thick as my forearm, rusted the color of dried blood, set into 2 stone posts, stacked and mortared into the living rock. It stood higher than a man could reach. It spanned the whole neck, creek to sheer wall, and it had been there long enough that the mountain had begun to take it. Vines had climbed it, rust had eaten it, still it stood, still it held. There was a chain and a lock at the center that looked newer than the rest, the way a fresh suture looks on old scarred skin. Men were waiting on the other side. I counted 4 through the bars, then a 5th farther back. They had the stillness of people who had stood a long time and would stand a long time more. Mountain people, weathered, lean, dressed in canvas and flannel gone the color of the ground. They carried rifles, not raised, not slung either, held in the crook of the arm the way a man holds a tool he might need. In front of them, one gnarled hand on the iron, stood the oldest man I had ever seen, upright and armed. I did not know his name yet. I knew the type. He had a face like something carved out of a root, all knots and hollows, a white beard, eyes gone pale at the edges, the way old eyes go. He held a double-barreled shotgun across his body with the ease of a man who had held it every day of a long life. He did not look at Delacroix's paperwork. He did not look at the company men. He looked at Silas. Something passed between them, some old mountain arithmetic. Then he looked at the rest of us, one at a time, and when his pale eyes reached me, they stopped and held, and I had the distinct and unwelcome feeling of being weighed. "You brought them up here." He said it to Silas. "They were coming with me or without me. You know that. Better with. Your brother went past this gate." I know what my brother did. The old man's jaw worked. He looked at the company men. Delacroix's fixer stepped up with the folder, and the easement started in on legal access and mineral rights and the company's obligation to recover its personnel. The old man let him talk the way the mountain lets rain fall. Without a sign, it reached him. When the fixer ran out of words, the old man was quiet a while. The creek ran through the gap under the gate. Up on the ridges, the wind moved in the hemlocks and did not come down to us. "One man past this gate is still alive," he said at last. "You already got him out. He walked back through this gate on his own 2 feet, and I let him through, and I have regretted every hour since. A man does not come out of that hollow hole. The ones that seem to come out whole are the ones you watch. The rest of your people are dead. I will tell you that for free, so you do not have to open this gate to learn it. They are dead. What killed them is still in there. This gate is the only thing that has kept it in there since before your grandfather's grandfather. Open it, and you do not just go in. You let out. We have a legal right to recover our people," the fixer said. The old man looked at him a long moment. Then he looked at me, only at me. He spoke as if the other men were not there, and I understood that Silas had told him something about me, or that he had decided something on his own. "You are the doctor. I am. You keep men alive. I try. Then you will have the worst time of anybody here. In that hollow, keeping men alive is how you get them killed. You will want to run to the hurt one. It is your nature. I can see it on you. The hurt one is the bait. The blood is the bell it rings for its supper. When it goes bad in there, and it will, the man on the ground is already gone. Go to him, and you are just the next plate. Remember I said that. When the time comes, you will want to forget it, and I am telling you now so some part of you cannot." I did not answer. There was no answer to a thing like that, and he was right about my nature, which unsettled me. A man should not be able to read that through a gate on 10 minutes acquaintance. The fixer produced the company's bolt cutters. He had to. The easement was real. The lawyers were real. 6 dead men were real. Whatever the old man was, he was not going to fire a shotgun into a group of men on company land with a legal document in play, and everyone at that gate knew it. It was theater. We all played our parts. The old man stepped back. His men lowered their rifles a degree. The fixer cut the newer chain, and it took him a while, because he was soft and the chain was hard. I watched the old man's face the whole time the cutters worked. It never changed. That was the worst thing about it. He watched us open the gate the way the old watch the young make the one mistake that cannot be taken back, not with anger, with grief for what was about to be true. The chain came apart and dropped into the black mud with the sound of a dropped tool. Silas pushed the gate. It did not want to move. The hinges had rusted and the mountain had settled against it, and it took 3 of us leaning our weight before it gave. When it gave all at once, swinging inward with a long iron shriek that went up the hollow and came back off the rock walls twice before it faded. I have thought since that if there was a moment the thing first knew we were coming, that was it. The sound of the gate it had lived behind, opening for the first time in its long memory. The old man let us file through. As I passed, he did not look at me. He was looking up the hollow into the dark green, and his lips were moving. It took me a few steps to understand he was praying, or singing, some low thing in a cadence older than any hymn I knew. The hair stood up on my arms under my sleeves. I told myself it was the cold coming through the gap. Past the gate, the hollow changed. Not the way I expected. The light did not dim. The temperature did not drop. No fog rolled in, none of the cheap machinery of a scary place. It was subtler than that, and much worse. The hollow past the gate looked exactly like the hollow before it. Same hemlocks, same black creek, same coal dust in the mud. What was different was the birds. They stopped. Not all at once. Over the first quarter mile, the sound of the woods thinned around us, the small, constant chatter of a living forest going quiet piece by piece, until there was nothing left but our own boots and the creek and the wind-up high that never came down. By the time I noticed the silence whole, it had already been whole a while. A wrong absence. Silas saw me notice it. No birds. I said, no birds, no squirrels, no deer sign where it ought to be thick with it. Nothing that can leave has stayed. He looked back at me. You are walking through a country everything with sense already ran out of. Everything but us. Silas showed me the trees before we made camp. He did not say anything at first. He just stopped at a big hemlock and put his hand flat on the trunk and waited for me to see it. It took me a moment. Then I did, and once I had, I saw it everywhere, and I could not stop seeing it. The bark was raked. Long parallel gouges, 4 of them, dug deep into the wood and gone gray-brown with age, the sap long dried in the wounds. Claw marks. I had seen bear-marked trees before. The territorial scoring a boar leaves as high as it can reach on its hind legs, and for one settling second I told myself that was this. Then I looked at the height. The marks were above my head, not a little, well above the reach of my lifted hand, above the reach of any bear that ever stood in those mountains, raked into the trunk at a height a man would need a ladder to touch, and they were not on one tree. They were on the big hemlocks, up and down that stretch of the hollow, all at the same wrong height. Something tall had walked the length of this country over years and marked its trees the way any animal marks its trees. Except nothing that walked on 4 legs made these, and nothing that stood on 2 legs stood that tall. How high does the thing have to be? I said, and did not finish it. Higher than you want, Silas said. He took his hand off the trunk. It does that where the boundary of its ground used to run, before the gate. Old marks. It has not needed to walk this low in a long time. We are the reason it is going to. He started walking again. Do not tell the young one what they are. He is close enough to the edge as it is. I did not tell Billy, but I walked the rest of that day with my eyes going up, against my will, to the height on every big trunk we passed, measuring the thing before I ever saw it, and finding no number my mind wanted to hold. We made camp that first night, short of the crew's last known position, on a flat above the creek where the ground was dry. We built a fire. Silas allowed it, but did not like it. We ate. The company men talked too loud, the way men do when quiet presses on them. Silas sat apart, watching the dark up the hollow, eating little. I went and sat with him a while. I am not fully sure why. I think I had decided that, of everyone at that fire, His read on things was the one I trusted, and in a bad place, I went and sat near the one I trusted. "Tell me about your brother," I said. For a while I thought he would not. Then he did, quiet, looking up the hollow instead of at me. His name was Eli. Younger than me by 6 years. He never believed a word the old people said, same as your friend back there with the smile. Eli thought the pact was a way to keep outsiders off the coal. Maybe once it was. Maybe 100 years ago somebody made it up for that. It stopped being made up a long time ago, if it ever was. Eli signed on with your company's first survey because the money was real, and the rule was, to his mind, a story. He went past this gate with 5 other men and a satellite phone. 9 days later, they stopped calling out. The company waited. I did not wait. I came up to the gate the night they went quiet, and I stood where old Hiram stands, and I listened. So the old man was Hiram. I filed it. "What did you hear?" I said. Silence was quiet a moment. The fire popped. Far up the hollow, so far it might have been wind, something made a low sound and stopped. I heard one of them still alive, a long way in, calling out, and I heard the thing that was hunting him. I heard it find him. Then I did not hear him anymore. He turned and looked at me. His gray eyes held a look I knew from my own mirror on the mornings. The list was heavy. I could not go through the gate. You do not open it at night, not for anything. That is the rule too. So I stood there with my hands on the iron and let my brother's voice go out. I said nothing, so do not ask me why I'm up here for no money, he said. I stood at a gate once and did the right thing, the thing the rules said, and it has been eating me a year. Your company gave me a way back through. I am not here to find your survey team. I am here to find whatever is left of Eli, to see the thing that took him, to know. I did not tell him I had a list of my own. I did not tell him I understood the mathematics of a man who would walk into a hollow full of dead men to close one open account. I sat with him a while longer. The fire burned down. We set a watch. I took the middle of the night, because my body was going to be awake for it anyway. Nothing came that first night. But twice, in the long black middle of it, with the camp asleep behind me and the creek running its slow black run below, I heard something up the hollow I could not file. Not a howl. Lower than that, and shorter. A single deep note that started and stopped. The second time, it was closer than the first. Between the two, I sat with my back to a hemlock and my jump bag open beside me and ran my numbers. 4 minutes to the brain, 90 seconds from a torn femoral. For the first time in my adult life, the numbers gave me no comfort, because the older animal part of me, the part the surgeon had spent 30 years talking over, had begun to understand something. The thing up the hollow did not care about my numbers. It had numbers of its own. We found the first body the next afternoon. Reese saw it before the rest of us. He said nothing. He just stopped walking and stood looking up. One by one we came up behind him and looked up too. And the hollow went quiet the way a room goes quiet. The crew had strung orange flagging tape between 2 hemlocks to mark a line. The most ordinary thing in the world. One of them was up in the hemlock above it, high up, 30 feet or more, wedged into the fork where a big limb came off the trunk. For one merciful second, my mind tried to make it a man who had climbed and gotten stuck, because that was a thing that could happen in a world I understood. Then the details arrived, one at a time, the way they always do, the way they used to arrive on the table under the lights. And the world I understood went away. He had been put up there. No man climbs a hemlock in that shape, and his chest was open. I have seen a great many open chests. I have opened a few myself. Fast, in the field, with a rib spreader and no time, cracking a man to get at the heart while the anesthesia was a prayer and a syringe. So I knew what an open chest looks like when a person does it, from the outside with tools. This was not that. This chest had been opened from the inside. The ribs were levered outward, every one, sprung from the spine and splayed wide, the whole cage of him standing open to the air like a thing turned inside out. There was a wrongness to the mechanics of it my hands understood before my mouth could say it. Ribs do not go that way. The muscle and ligament and joint of a human rib are built to hold that cage shut against the world. To spring them all outward, every one, something would have to reach into the chest and push from inside, with a strength I could not make my mind hold. And the cage was empty. What should have been inside was not. I have spent enough nights with the rest of it. Nobody spoke. Billy made a sound and turned away, and I heard him being sick behind a tree, and I did not fault him. I'd been sick behind trees in a younger year. Then Arthur stepped up beside me. He looked up at the body with his clinician's calm, that ledger-keeping calm I had trusted for a decade, and he said the thing that started us all down the wrong road. "That is not an animal," Arthur said. "Look at the throat." We got the body down. It took ropes and a long time, and it was ugly work. When we had him laid on a tarp, Arthur crouched over him and did the thing we were both trained to do, which is turn the horror into a report. It is a defense. I made the person into a set of findings, and while I cataloged the findings, I did not have to feel the person. Arthur was good at it, better than me. For Arthur, it was not a defense at all. It was only how he saw. Here. He tilted the dead man's head back with 2 fingers under the jaw, gentle, professional, and showed me the throat. Single incised wound. Left to right. Deep. 1 pass. Severed the carotid and the trachea both. That killed him. He was dead before anything touched his chest. I looked. Arthur was right. Under the black ruin of the rest of him was a wound in the throat as clean and deliberate as anything I had ever put there myself, with a scalpel, 1 draw of a blade. A good blade, sharp, in a steady hand. It was the most human thing in that clearing, and it did not belong. So the chest was after, I said. The chest was after. He sat back on his heels and looked up at me, and there was, God help me, a kind of satisfaction in his face. Arthur had found the loose thread that unraveled the impossible thing back into a possible one, and being the man who did that was worth a great deal to him. There is no monster. There is a man with a knife. He killed these people. Then he tore them up to look like an animal did it, to scare off anyone who came looking. Post-mortem mutilation staged as a predator kill. I have seen it in war. So have you. This is not folklore. This is a person. I wanted him to be right. That matters, given everything that came later. Standing in that silent hollow with an open man at my feet, I wanted with my whole heart for Arthur to be right. A killer I could name and cuff and hand to the law. A thing that ran by rules I knew. And the throat wound was real. That was the trap. The evidence Arthur found was true evidence. It just was not the whole of the truth, and the piece it left out was the piece that mattered. But that afternoon, his theory went through the group like a warmth. I could watch the men take it up, because if it was a man, then they were the hunters and not the hunted, and Delacroix's phrase, animal attack, had been wrong in a way that put them back in charge. Even I felt it. Only Silas did not. He stood at the edge of the clearing, arms crossed, and looked at the open chest of a stranger and said, quiet, so maybe only I heard, "A man did the throat." Yes, a man surely did the throat. He did not finish the thought. I did not ask him to. I have wished 100 times that I had. We found Vance the next morning. He was in a mine. The hollow was full of them. Old adits and shafts driven into the ridges by men dead before my grandfather was born. Most collapsed, all black-mouthed and cold. The crew had been mapping them, among other things, and one, a low horizontal shaft into the base of the north ridge, had partly come down. From inside it, when we passed, came a voice. "Hello? Is somebody there? Oh God, is somebody there?" When a living human voice came out of that hole in that dead hollow, something in my chest came loose that I had not known was clenched. A living man. After the tarp and the missing birds and the low note at night, living man calling out was the sweetest, most ordinary sound in the world. Every one of us moved toward it before Silas could say a word. We dug him out. It did not take long. He was not as trapped as he sounded. I did not think that clearly at the time. It only filed itself away for later. Vance came out filthy and shaking, blinking against even the dim light. A lean man of about 40. A good face, open, likable, tired. He grabbed my arm with both hands and wept and thanked God and thanked us and said he had thought he would die in there. It was a performance so complete I did not see a seam in it, not one. And I have spent my life reading the faces of frightened men. Vance was better at being a person than most people are. I mean that flat, as a fact about him and not as a way of dressing him up. The grief was right. The gratitude was right. The little details were right. The crack in his voice on God. The way he could not stop touching us, needing to confirm we were real. I have thought a great deal about what a mind has to be under all that to run the performance so cleanly while the truth of him sat cold and still at the center doing arithmetic. I put a blanket on him. I gave him water. I did what there was to do. And the whole time, the man I was tending had, days before, cut the throats of 5 men he had worked beside and done the rest to them to hide it. He let me tend him. He was grateful. I believe now the gratitude was even real in its way, the way a spider is grateful for a fly. Billy took to him. That was the worst of it, watching it start. Vance was warm to Billy, big brotherly, the older capable man taking the scared young one under his wing. And Billy, who wanted so badly for one of the men in that hollow to tell him he was doing all right, drank it up. Inside a day they were inseparable. Vance would murmur to him, and Billy would stand a little straighter. I saw it and thought, good, the kid needs somebody. I was wrong the way I was wrong about all of it. Wrong in the direction of hope. Silas would not go near Vance. I noticed it and did not understand it. He kept to the far side of every fire and eyed him with the flat gray patience of a man watching a snake decide whether the room is warm enough to move. It was 2 days before he told me why, and by then a great deal had happened. We found the crew's main camp that afternoon, before the bear, and it told me more than anyone in it wanted told. It was a proper camp. 4 tents in a clearing above the creek. A cook set up a folding table with the survey gear still on it. It had the wrongness of a place people left in the middle of a sentence. A mess kit half-washed. A paperback splayed open, face down, swollen with damp. A camp chair tipped back as if a man had stood up fast and never sat down again. Everything the crew owned was still there. Everything except the crew. I went to the folding table. The survey maps were weighted down with a rock, and I moved the rock and looked. Most of it meant nothing to me. Contour lines and grid marks in a hand going careful, then less careful, then not careful at all, as the days ran down. But there was one map with a mark on it that even I could read. A small area up a side draw, circled twice, hard, the pencil pressed so deep it had torn the paper. Beside the circle, in block letters, a word I will not spell because it is the name of a metal that does not belong in a coal seam and is worth more than coal by a long way. And beside the word, a date. And beside the date, a set of initials that were not Silas's brothers. They were Vance's. I did not understand all of it standing there. I understood enough to go cold. Somebody on that crew had found a seam worth killing for, and somebody had made sure his own initials were the last ones on the map. Billy came up beside me, young and wanting to be useful, and looked at the torn circle without knowing what he was looking at. "They find gold or something?" he said, half a joke, the way a scared kid makes a joke to have something to do with his mouth. "Or something," I said, and I folded the map small and put it inside my jacket against my chest, and I did not fully know why I hid it, except that I had begun, without letting myself say so, to distrust the one man we had pulled out of the ground alive. Silas watched me do it from across the camp. He did not come over. He did not ask what was on the map. He already knew, the way he knew everything down there, and he only gave me one small nod, the nod of a man confirming that the outsider had finally started to see the shape of the floor under his feet. That was the wrongness of the camp. Not a body, not blood, just a place full of the ordinary belongings of 6 living men, one torn circle on a map, a set of initials. and the total listening silence of a hollow that had already taken all six and was working patient on the rest of us, because the next thing we found was the bear. We came on it in a side draw off the main hollow, where a smaller creek fed into Dead Creek over a black shelf of rock. Reese smelled it first, then we all did. The thick, sweet reek of something large and days dead. We came around the shoulder of the draw, and there it was on the rocks, and even the company men who had taken Arthur's theory up as gospel a day before went silent. Arthur's theory had no room in it for the bear. It was a black bear. A big one. A boar. 500 pounds of the top predator of that whole country. The thing everything else in those woods stepped around, and it had been crushed. That is the only word. Something had taken the largest animal in the mountains and broken it the way a larger thing breaks a smaller one. The ribs stove in, the spine wrong, the great skull cracked, and then the chest had been opened. The same way, pried outward from the inside, hollowed, a 500-pound bear, opened and emptied like the man in the hemlock. No man alive does that with a blade. Every one of us knew it. Standing there in the smell, I looked at Arthur. I could not help it, and I saw the thing happen in his face. I have never forgiven myself for reading wrong. I read it as fear. It was fear. But it was a specific fear, and I mistook the specific for the general. Arthur looked at the bear, and his theory died in front of him. What came into his face was not the ordinary terror of realizing there is a monster. It was the private terror of realizing he was no longer the smartest one in the hollow, that the ground had shifted under the one thing he had, his rightness, his ledger, his half-step behind me that he had kept for 10 years. Arthur could survive a monster. What Arthur could not survive was being wrong in front of me and being afraid in front of me. I saw both arrive in him at the bear, and I thought only, he is scared, we are all scared. I put a hand on his shoulder. He flinched off it, like I had burned him. That night, Silas told me about the knife. He waited until the others were down, then crouched by me at the watch and spoke low. His brother's body had been recovered by the first search team, the one that got the single man out. He had seen it, insisted on seeing it. Eli's throat had been cut, one pass, left to right, a good blade, sharp, in a steady hand, and then Eli's chest had been opened, the way all of them were opened. "You see it now," Silas said. "The man does the throat, the thing does the chest. They are not the same killer, Doctor. They are two killers. And one of them is walking around this camp with a blanket on his shoulders, being grateful to you." The cold went all the way down. Vance. My people do not carry knives like the one that made that throat wound. We carry old knives, worn knives, for skinning and rope. That wound was a fighting knife, a tactical blade, the kind your kind carries. I watched Vance clean one 2 nights ago when he thought everyone was asleep. He is careful, very careful. But I have watched him since we pulled him out of that hole, and I have put it together. Here's what I think happened. Then you can decide what kind of man you are going to be about it. He told me. It fit. It fit the way a bone fits back into a joint with a sick soft certainty. The crew had struck a vein in that hollow past the coal. Some vein worth more than coal. Vance understood before the others what it would be worth to be the only man who knew where it was. So he killed them. One at a time, or all at once, I do not know. With the knife. Quietly. A man they trusted turning on them in the dark of a place where no help was coming. Then Vance had a problem. 5 bodies, and a company that would come looking. And Vance, who was better at being a person than most people, understood people. He understood that the one thing to keep the company from investigating too hard, the one story that turned 5 murders into an act of God with a settlement attached, was the local legend. The monster in the hollow. So he took the bodies and opened their chests to look like the stories. He staged an animal attack. He was going to walk out the sole traumatized survivor, a mineral claim in his head and a company's sympathy at his back. Here is the part I think Vance does not know, Silas said, and for the first time there was almost pity in his voice. Or he half knows and cannot let himself know it all the way, because it would break the arithmetic he lives by. He staged an animal attack in the one hollow on this earth where the animal is real. He opened those chests to imitate the thing, and the thing does not like to be imitated. He rang the bell, Doctor. He put blood in the soil of this hollow, and he opened bodies the way it opens bodies, and it has been awake and hunting ever since. It does not know or care that a man started it. He thinks he faked the monster. He woke it up. I sat with that a long time. Below us, Dead Creek ran its slow black run. Twice, up the hollow, the low, deep note came and went, closer than the night before. I understood now that it was moving, ranging the hollow since the gate opened. Since we came in with our warm, living bodies and our blood, coming to the water, tasting the hollow, working out where its supper had gone to stand. Why not tell everyone, I said. Put Vance down and get out. Because your friend Arthur has decided Vance tells the truth, and your company men will believe the doctor over the mountain man every time. And getting out is not simple anymore. The gate opens one way at night, and it is not the way we want. He looked at me with those flat gray eyes. And because I want to see it, God help me. I have wanted to see the thing that took my brother since the night I stood at that gate. I will not leave this hollow until I have. That is my own sickness. I am not going to pretend it away to you. He was right about Arthur. That was the worst of it. Over the next day, I tried, carefully, to raise the question of the knife, of 2 killers instead of 1. Arthur shut it down flat. He did it in front of the company men. He did it with a small, cold smile. I finally, too late, understood. Arthur had decided Vance was innocent, and the killer was the mountain folk, and the thing in the hollow was a bear or a wild man or a story. Because that was the version of the hollow where Arthur was still right, where his throat-wound theory held, where the ledger balanced in his favor, and I had come along and stood over a bear that broke his theory and put a hand on his shoulder while he was afraid, and Arthur was not going to give me the satisfaction of being right about this too. He would rather be wrong all the way to the bottom than agree with me. I did not fully believe that of him then. I thought better of him. I had trusted his ledger 10 years, and could not make myself see that it had my name in the debit column the whole time. It came into the camp that night, closer than it had come before, and I learned more in the 10 minutes it was among us than the trail camera taught me later. The camera showed me what it looked like. The night showed me how it worked. I had the middle watch. Billy could not sleep, and he came and sat by me at the dead coals. For a while we did not talk. Then he did, low, the way a young man talks in the dark when he decides the older man beside him is safe. He told me about his mother, more than at the trucks, the specific medicine and the specific cost of it, and the specific arithmetic of a young man who had done the math and found the only number that worked was the company's, which meant this hollow, which meant here. He told me he had never fired the rifle at anything but paper. He told me he was afraid he would freeze if the time came, and he asked me, straight, the way only the young ask, whether I had frozen my first time. I told him the truth. Everybody freezes. The ones who live are the ones who come back out of it a half-second faster. The freeze is not the failure. The staying frozen is. I thought he would come back out of it. I believed that when I said it, and I was right, at the very end. And it cost him everything to prove me right. That was when the coals shifted. Not the fire, the ground. A weight came down on the earth, out past the ring of dead light, close. I felt it through the seat of my pants before I heard a thing. A single soft compression of the ground that only a large body makes, and every hair on me stood up at once. I put my hand flat on Billy's chest. Not a word, just the flat of my hand. He understood. He went still. The thing came into the edge of our camp in the dark. I could not see it, and it could not see us, and that one fact ran under everything that came after. We were maybe 30 feet apart in the black, and the only advantage anyone had was in holding the most still. It moved through the edge of the camp slow. I tracked it the way it tracked us, by sound and by the ground. A soft compression here, a long pause. The faint drag of something along the bark of a hemlock as it passed, casting its blind head back and forth for the small sounds a sleeping camp makes. It went past the two men sleeping farthest out. I heard it stop over Reese, who slept deep and did not stir. I heard the long pause of it standing over a sleeping man with its filmed eyes and its listening head. I have never wanted so badly to move and been so sure that moving was death. It was deciding. It could not see the man at its feet. It could only hear. And Reese, in deep sleep, breathed slow and even and quiet, and the thing stood over him and listened to a sound too small and too steady to fix on, and moved on. Reese slept through the closest brush with death he will ever have. I never told him. It came toward the fire, toward us. And Billy, under my flat hand, did the bravest thing I watched him do until the last night. He sat at the end of a boy's whole supply of courage and did not break, did not bolt, did not make the sound his entire nervous system screamed to make, while a blind thing that opened bears came listening across the camp toward the warmth of the coals where two live hearts beat too fast. I could hear my own pulse. I remember thinking, with the flat cold clarity that comes at the bottom of fear, that my heart was the loudest thing in the hollow and there was nothing I could do about it. The surgeon who had spent his life listening to hearts was going to be found by his own. I made myself breathe slow, the way I had taught Billy. In for 4, hold, out for 4. I felt Billy match it under my hand. In for 4, out for 4. The two of us turning ourselves down as low as living men can go. It stopped at the edge of the light. The ground took its weight 10 feet away, and it stood there, close enough now that the smell of it reached me. That smell is the thing I never lost. It smelled like the inside of a chest, the coppery mineral wet of an open body, and under that older, the cold dead air smell of a mine shut since long before any of us were born. That was the smell of the thing. It smelled like the two places it lived, the bodies and the mine. It stood 10 feet from us, with its blind head swinging, listening for the hearts it could smell but not fix, and Billy and I gave it nothing. After the longest 10 seconds of my life, it turned its head away. The weight came off the ground. It went back out of the camp the way it had come, casting, unhurried, hunting, and the dark took it. I did not sleep the rest of that watch, neither did Billy. We sat shoulder to shoulder at the dead fire until the gray came up, not talking, because talking was death. Somewhere in those hours, a thing settled between us that does not have a good word. The thing that settles between two men who have held still together while death listened for their hearts. When the light came, Billy looked at me. He did not say anything, but he had come back out of the freeze. I could see it. He had sat at the bottom of the worst fear a body can hold and not moved, and he knew now that he could. I have wondered since whether I did him a kindness or a terrible thing by teaching him he had it in him. It was that exact thing, the not breaking, the coming back out of the freeze a half-second faster, that let him walk down off the rock toward the water a night later and ring every bell he had. The trail camera almost saved us. I have thought about that too. The crew had left a camp, and in the ruined gear Reese found a trail camera on a strap the motion-triggered kind hunters use. It had been in the creek, water damaged, but the card might be intact. We had no way to read it in the field. Arthur, of all people, carried a laptop for his charts, and that evening we dried the card as best we could, and he worked at it. After a long while, he pulled images off it, and we crowded around the little screen in the dark like men around a fire. Most frames were nothing, empty hollow, day and night, the timestamp counting up, then a frame with something at the edge of it, pale, out of focus, too close to the lens, then a frame I have not been able to unsee. The camera saw more of the thing than any of us had. Some images do their damage in proportion to how clearly they are held, and I have held this one clearly enough and long enough for the both of us. Only the shape, then. It stood upright. Whatever else it was It stood on two legs like a man, and it was too tall, and it was pale, a sick, bloodless white, where the flash caught it. The head was wrong, long. The eyes in the flash did not shine the way an animal's eyes shine. They were flat and pale and filmed, and I understood then what Hiram had meant about it not seeing well. Those were the eyes of a thing that had lived in the dark of the mines so long the eyes had given up. It did not need them. And it was turned in the frame, not toward the camera, but slightly away, its wrong head cocked. It took me a moment to understand what it was doing, and when I did, the bottom went out of me. It was listening. The camera had triggered on it, and it had not looked at the camera, because the camera meant nothing to it. It stood in the dark of the hollow, with its blind filmed eyes and its long, wrong head turned, listening. I knew, the way the body knows a thing before the mind agrees, that it was listening for us. For the small sounds a living body cannot help. The heartbeat, the breath, the blood going around and around in its warm circuit, ringing its little bell. Arthur looked at the frame a long time. Then he closed the laptop. Camera glitch, he said. Double exposure. You can see the artifact along the edge. Nobody argued, because everybody wanted him to be right, the way I had wanted him to be right over the tarp. Want is the strongest current in a frightened camp. But I looked at Silas across the little dead screen, and Silas looked back, and neither of us said a word, and both of us knew. That was the night I stopped being able to pretend I was going to bring everyone out of that hollow. The tremor came the next day. It took Silas's leg, and it took whatever was left of the thing between me and Arthur. I do not know if it was a real tremor, or the mountain settling, or worse. The ground moved, once. A low roll I felt in my feet and my teeth. It was enough. We were passing an old mine timber, a rotten, squared beam holding up nothing anymore, a relic. The ground rolled and the beam came down, and it came down on Silas. It caught his leg below the knee and pinned it. I heard the bone go. It is a wet green sound, and the ear does not lose it once it has learned it. Silas bit off the cry almost before it started, because he was that kind of man. I was on him before I decided to be. That was my nature, the thing Hiram saw through the gate. I got my shoulder under the beam and called for help, and two things happened at once that split the group down the middle forever. Billy and Reese came to help me lift, and Arthur said, "Leave him." I looked up. Arthur stood back, the ledger in his face, the cold calm, and he was already talking, fast and reasonable, and every word of it true, which is what made it monstrous. His leg is broken. We cannot carry a man with a broken leg out of this hollow at speed, and we need speed. The thing is closer every night. You all know it. We splint him, leave him the radio and a light and a weapon, and we move fast and bring help back. That is the tactical call. That is the call that gets the most of us out. You were a field surgeon. You know triage. You do not spend the whole unit to save the one man who slows you to a death. Leave him. We come back. In a different hollow, on a different mountain, with a different thing hunting us. Arthur would have been right. It was the correct call. It was the call I had made myself. In the tent. More than once, over men I could not save at the cost of men I could. Triage is a cold mathematics. I had spent my life doing it, and Arthur knew that, and he used my own mathematics against me in front of the company men to be right about one more thing. But I had learned the rule, Hiram's rule, at the gate. The hurt one is the bait. The blood is the bell. A bleeding man left alone in that hollow with a light and a radio was not a man left a chance. He was a supper bell, rung and walked away from. And I had learned the other rule too, the one nobody gave me, the one I had carried out of the tent in my own boot 11 years. There is a place past which the mathematics stops being true, past which saving the unit at the cost of the one is not triage anymore, only the thing I told myself so I could bear to walk away. I had walked away that many times in the tent because the war gave me no choice. I had a choice now, and I was tired to the bone of adding to the list. "We are not leaving him," I said. I lifted the beam. Billy and Reese lifted with me. Silas dragged himself free. I splinted the leg there on the ground with the thing possibly listening from up the hollow, and then I got Silas onto my back and I carried him. Arthur watched me do it, and what was in his face was not concern, and it was not even fear anymore, it was hatred. Clean and cold and a decade deep, the ledger finally showing its true balance. I saw it. This time I did not mistake it for anything else, and it was too late to matter, because we were already broken into the men who would carry the wounded and the men who would not. In a hollow like that, that break is the crack the thing comes through. We ran out of hollow the wrong direction. That was the thing nobody had accounted for. When it went bad, and it went bad fast after the beam, the only way out was back the way we came. Down the hollow, to the neck, and the gate. And the gate was hours off with a man on my back and the thing between us, and it had all day to work out where we were. We moved as fast as I could move, carrying Silas, which was not fast. Arthur moved faster than that, out ahead. The group strung out along the creek, in the failing light, the wounded man and the mountain man and the young man and me at the slow tail of it. Vance, I noticed, stayed near the front, near Arthur, near the fast men. Billy, God love him, stayed back with me. The light started to go, and the thing started to move. I could hear it now, not the low idle note from far off. This was closer, and it was not idle. It was pacing us. Up on the ridge, then, worse, down off the ridge, on our level, in the hemlocks, off to the side, keeping the creek between us, and then not keeping the creek between us at all. In that last hour of light, I learned the thing the trail camera had already told me, and I had not wanted to know. It hunted by sound. Every time the group made noise, a shout, a stumble, a dropped pack, the thing came toward the noise. Every time we went still and quiet, pressed to the trees, breathing slow, it lost us. It would range past, close enough that I saw it once through the trees at 40 yards, upright and pale and wrong, its long head swinging, casting for us the way a blind man's hand casts across a table for a thing he has knocked over. Blind, truly blind, or near it, hunting the hollow by ear, by the trembling of the ground, by the smell of blood on the air. And we had a man on my back with a broken leg wrapped in a bandage that was starting, slow, to show through. At first I did not understand why I kept finding our tail and not the front. Then I did, and it turned my stomach. The blood. Silas's leg. Not much. The bone had not broken the skin badly, but enough. A little seeping into the bandage, onto me, and when we crossed the creek at a shallows, because we had to, a little into the water, into Dead Creek. The water took it. I saw the thing on the far ridge stop and turn its long head down toward the water and start toward us with a new and terrible purpose. And I finally understood the whole of the rule all at once, standing in the black water with a bleeding man on my back. The soil is thirsty. The water remembers. Nothing that bleeds goes in the creek, because the creek is how it finds the living. There was a place on the retreat I still walk through in my sleep, a long slope of loose scree we had to cross, no way around it with the light going and the thing on our flank, a whole hillside of broken rock that would speak the second a boot hit it wrong. Silas, on my back, put his mouth close to my ear and breathed the instructions. Wait on the flat stones, never the loose. Test before you trust it. Slow is fast here. We went across it a foot at a time, 6 people and a wounded man, in a silence so total I could hear the blood in my own ears. One of the company men broke it, not on purpose. His foot found a flat stone that was not seated. It went out from under him. A slab the size of a dinner plate slid and knocked another, and another, a small bright clatter of rock going down the slope in the dark, loud as a dropped tray of glass in a quiet house. Everything stopped. Across the draw on the far ridge, the low note started and swung and came toward the sound of the rock the way a compass needle comes around to north. I felt it more than heard it, the attention of the thing turning, fixing, starting our way, and I did the only thing there was to do, which was nothing. I froze on the scree with a bleeding man on my back and my heart going like a fist on a door, and I willed every person on that slope to become stone. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed above a thread. The rock finished falling and the last pebble ticked to a stop, and then there was only the wind up high and the thing casting along the far ridge for a sound that had already died. It ranged there a long minute, looking for the noise to happen again, and the discipline that held every one of us motionless on an open slope while a blind thing hunted the memory of a sound is the single hardest thing I have ever seen people do, even the man who slipped, especially him. He lay half fallen, his palm bleeding on the rock, and did not so much as whimper. I have thought since that he saved all of us in that minute. He had the sense to be more afraid of moving than of dying, which is a kind of courage nobody gives a name to. When the note finally swung back up the ridge and away, we crossed the rest of the scree without a word. Not one of us looked at the man who had slipped. There are mistakes a man does not punish, because the country punishes them for him. We all knew which kind that had almost been. We reached the gate at dusk, the thing perhaps a quarter-mile back and closing on the smell of Silas's leg. Hiram was there. He had never left. He and 4 of his men stood at the open gate with their rifles. On the outside of it, they saw the state of us. The doctor with a bleeding man on his back, the group strung out and panicked behind, and Hiram's carved face did a thing I had not seen it do. It showed grief and resolve at once. He started forward through the gate to help. That was the moment it all came apart. And it came apart the way these things always do. Not through the monster, through the men. Because Billy had reached the end of what a 22-year-old can carry. He had been magnificent in his way. He had stayed at the back with me the whole retreat, the scared kid, when the capable men ran ahead, and he had not broken. But we reached the gate, and all at once there were armed men coming through it toward us out of the dark, Hiram's men. And behind us, in the hemlocks, the thing chose that moment to make the low note close, so close it came up through the ground into our feet. Billy, at the absolute limit of a boy's nervous system, heard the men in front and the thing behind, and saw a shape moving fast in the dark coming through the gate, and he did what a frightened animal does. He fired. I have gone over it 1,000 times. There is no version where Billy is to blame. He was a boy at the end of his rope, in a place built to snap ropes. He fired at a shape coming out of the dark. The shape was Old Man Hiram coming to help us. The round took the old man high in the chest, turned him half around, and put him down against the iron post of his own gate. Everything stopped. Even the thing in the hollow stopped for one held breath, as if it too were listening to what had just happened. And then Hiram's blood found the creek. He had gone down against the base of the iron post, and the post stood in the edge of the water where the creek ran through the neck under the gate. His blood came out of him fast, arterial. I could see it even in the dying light. It ran down the iron post and 3 ropes and found Dead Creek, and Dead Creek took it. This was not the little seep of Silas's leg into a shallows. This was a torrent, a whole big vessel emptying into the water at the one narrow place where the entire Hollows Creek funneled through. The water thickened. The sound of it changed, from running to swallowing. The froth came up black. The howl came down off the high ridge. I have tried and failed to describe it, and I am going to fail again. It was not rage and it was not hunger, or it was both of those turned into something older. A sound with a floor under human hearing, one I felt in the water of my own body. It came down slow and did not stop. It went on past the length any lungs should hold it, and the rusted chains we had cut, the fresh ones and the ancient ones both, everything that had ever held that gate sang and snapped. I understood then that the gate had never held the thing in by iron. The iron was the symbol. What held the thing in was the rule. And Vance had broken the rule days ago with the first murder, and we had broken it further at every step, and now, with a great living heart pumping itself out into the sacred water at the exact threshold, the rule was not just broken, it was reversed. The gate that had kept the thing in for 100 years stood open behind us, with a bell ringing across it, and the thing came down to the bell. I got Hiram's collar in my free hand and dragged him back from the water. I got Silas off my back and down beside him. I pressed my flat hand to the wound, with the dark of the old man coming up through my fingers faster than I wanted, and that is where I began. Everything up to here was to get back to my hands on that old man with the water swallowing his blood, and the thing coming down. The round had gone in high, off to the side. It was bad. As bad as a chest gets without being over in a minute. But it was not the neck, and it was not the heart. And there was a chance, the narrow, ugly kind I learned to work in the tent, if I could pack it and hold pressure and keep him from drowning in himself. I have never wanted to save a man more. I have never been more sure that saving him was the wrong prayer. The wound had already given the creek what it wanted, and no work of my hands would take that back out of the water. He was not quite gone. His pale eyes found me. His lips moved, and I bent close, because a dying man's last words are never what the movies promise, and I have learned to listen for the real thing. What Hiram said, with the last working breath in him, was not a curse and not a prayer. It was an instruction. Take the ridge. Blood was on his lips, and he pushed the words through it with a will I have rarely seen in a hurting body. Not the creek trail. It hunts the low ground by the water. Take the high rock. His pale eyes went to Silas on the ground. You know the hymn. You lead them out. His hand came up and closed on my wrist, the same worn grip Silas had. Do not waste yourself keeping me breathing, Doctor. I have one thing left worth doing with this blood, and I mean to do it. Get me to the cabin, then let me do the rest. I did not answer. I packed the wound with a field dressing and got a pressure wrap around his chest, and it slowed but did not stop, the way a chest wound does. I got him sitting up against the iron post, and told Reese to take his weight when it was time to move. And then the group made the decision that killed most of it. Arthur chose the creek trail. This was the center of everything, the place where the ledger and Arthur finally spent us all. Hiram's dying word was the ridge. Silas said it too. From the ground, take the high rock. The old man is right. It hunts the water. And Arthur had decided days ago that the mountain men were fools, that the doctor was his rival, that he alone saw clearly. He looked at the high rock trail, slower, harder, steeper. Then he looked at the low creek trail, fast and flat, running straight down the hollow to open ground, and he chose the creek. He chose speed. He chose, one final time, to be right against me. He swept the company men and Vance down the low trail with him, fast, away from the gate, along the black water, into the exact ground the thing owned. I could not stop them. I had one old man's blood on my hands and a broken man at my feet, and I shouted the ridge. I shouted it. Arthur did not turn. The group went with the fast man the way frightened groups do, and only Billy stayed. Billy, who had fired the shot, who was a boy drowning in what he had done, stayed at the tail again. Reese stayed. Silas said, quiet and grim, "They are dead. He has killed them all. Take us up the rock." So I got Silas onto my back where he had ridden all day. Reese got the old man's arm across his shoulders and took his weight. Billy kept the rifle up, and his young face pointed at the dark. We turned from the fast trail and the men on it and climbed toward the high ground. And behind us and below us, down along the black water, the thing came out of the hollow and found the men who had gone the low way. Some of it came up to us on the ridge as sound. Sound is worse. It leaves the pictures to be made, and I have made them enough. Billy in the radio is the part I will hand on, because it is the thing I carry out of that hollow that is not only horror. We were up on the rock, climbing, when it caught the men on the creek trail below. We heard it start. Then Billy, climbing just below me, went still, and I looked down, and he had his radio in his hand. All of us had radios, and on Billy's, tinny and small and far, we could hear the creek trail. We could hear what was happening to the men who had gone with Arthur, because one of their radios was keyed, and the small dying speaker gave it to us across the dark. Billy, 22, who had put a round in the old man an hour before and had not stopped shaking, looked up at me on the rock. His face, in the last of the light, was doing a thing I had only seen a few times in my life, in men who had decided something. He was not shaking anymore. That was how I knew. "It goes to sound," Billy said. "You said, it goes to whatever is loudest. Billy, they are already dead down there." His voice was steady, steadier than the whole trip. "You said it?" He said it. "It is going to finish them, and then it is going to come up this rock after us. After you and Silas and Reese. Because we are what is left, unless it has something louder to come to. Billy, no. Get up here. That is an order. Get up here." He was already going. He turned on the rock and went back down toward the creek, toward the sound. He keyed his own radio so it would not cut out, and he started to shout. He shouted and crashed through the brush and threw rocks into the black water so it splashed. He made himself the loudest thing in that hollow, a beacon of noise driving down toward the water, away from us, drawing the blind hunting thing off the ridge trail and down to the creek where he was ringing every bell a body can ring. And it worked. God forgive me, it worked. I felt the thing's attention leave us. I felt the ridge go quiet above the water as the low notes swung down toward the boy and his radio and his splashing. I did not go down after him. Hiram had told me not to, days ago, at the gate. When the time comes, you will want to forget it, and I am telling you now, so some part of you cannot. The old man had been right. Some part of me could not. Some part of me held me on the rock while the boy bought us the ridge with everything he had. I heard it reach him. Through the radio and through the air at once, a half-second apart, the way thunder comes after the far lightning. The splashing stopped. Billy's voice did a thing a voice does exactly once. And then, through the small speaker still keyed in his dead hand, I heard the sound of the boy's body being opened. That wet green levering sound I knew from the tent and from the man in the hemlock, close and clear on tinny radio. Then static. Then even the static stopped. I climbed. I do not remember most of it. I climbed with the man on my back and did not let myself make a sound. None of us made a sound. We went up the high ground, silent as the dead, in a silence that was the only thing keeping us alive, because the thing was feeding now, down by the water, and a feeding thing is a distracted thing. Distraction was the only mercy that hollow had left to give. We reached the cabin near full dark, an old miner's cabin up on a bench of the ridge, a squat thing of hand-hewn logs with a stone chimney. One of the crews marked waypoints, and, more to the point, the only walls in that hollow that were not a tree. We got inside and barred the door. I laid Hiram down by the cold hearth, Silas beside him. Reese and I pushed what furniture there was against the door and the one shuttered window. Then we sat in the dark and listened to the thing finish at the creek and come looking for the rest of us. We were not alone for long. Twice, while I worked to keep the old man from drowning in his own chest, something scratched at the door, and both times it was a man and not the thing. Arthur came up out of the dark first. 10 minutes behind him, Vance, the two survivors of the creek trail. The company men who had gone the low way with them did not come, and I did not have to ask what that meant. We let them in, both of them, because no one leaves a man to that hollow, no matter what he has done. Arthur came in with his eyes gone hollow, and his ledger finally, permanently blank. When I asked him where the others were, he said, in a flat, dead voice, there was nothing to be done for them, which was not an answer. It was what he said instead of saying he had run and left them to it. Down the creek trail, when it came, Arthur had done the cold arithmetic one last time, and it came out Arthur, and he saved himself. The blankness in his face was not grief. It was the ledger discovering it had finally balanced its own keeper into nothing. Vance came in different, shaking and grateful and alive, the way he came out of the mine shaft, the sole survivor, twice over now. He went straight to Billy's absence and to the wounded and made himself useful and warm. I watched the murderer, who had started all of it, kneel down beside the old man. His lie had gotten killed. and offer to help me hold pressure. I told him to get away from the old man. Quiet, so the others would not hear the thing in my voice. Silas kept his eyes on him from the floor and said nothing. The time for saying it had not come. The thing was outside. There is an order to these things, because the thing was outside now. We heard it come up off the creek. We heard it find the base of the ridge and start to climb, slow, casting, its long head swinging. Then we heard it out there in the dark beyond the logs, close, breathing, and every living body in that cabin went as still as it could make itself. Still and quiet was the whole of what we had left. The siege went most of the night. I am going to tell it the way it happened, which was slow, because slow is what nobody expects about the worst nights, and slow is the part that does the real work. It did not throw itself at the walls. I had braced for that. Some part of me wanted it, a straightforward assault I could understand, boards and bodies against a battering thing. That is not what it did. It circled. It went around the cabin in the dark, unhurried, and we tracked it by sound, because the shutter let in nothing but a knife edge of gray, a footfall here, a long pause, the scrape of something dragging along the logs at the far wall, testing, feeling down the seams between the timbers for a soft place. It knew we were in there. It had followed the blood and the noise up the ridge, and it knew its supper was behind the logs, and it was not stupid. That came clear over those hours. It was not a dumb animal battering a box. It was patient the way only a thing with a mind is patient. Once, it set its weight against the door itself, slow, a long, steady pressure that bowed the old wood inward a finger's width and held it there, testing the give of the bar, and then eased off. Without ever making the crash, that would have told it nothing. It was waiting for one of us to make the sound that told it where the wood was weakest, or the warm bodies pressed, and it had all night. So, we did not make the sound. We sat in the black and breathed slow through our mouths and did not shift our weight, and held it hour on hour while the thing walked its slow circle and dragged its testing hand along our walls. I have been under fire. I have lain in a ditch while rounds came in. This was worse. Under fire there is at least the honesty of the noise. Here the whole war was silence, and every one of us was a rifle that would go off if we breathed wrong, and the trigger was our own fear. Hiram was dying the whole time. I stayed by him with my hand on the wrap, feeling the wound work, doing the grim private math I have done 1,000 times. The dressing had bought hours, but the chest was filling, slow, and I could hear it in his breathing, the wet catch that means the space around a lung is going where it should not. Even out of that hollow, even in a trauma bay with everything I ever trained on, this old man was a coin toss at best. In a black cabin with a monster at the walls, he was no coin toss at all. He knew it. The dying always know before the doctors admit it, and Hiram had been closer to death his whole life than any man I ever met, standing his post at that gate. Around what I judged the deepest part of the night, the kerosene in our one shielded lantern burning low and orange, the thing still circling, Hiram put his hand on my wrist again and pulled me down close. He told me it was time. He told me the plan. I told him no. "You are a surgeon," Hiram said, low, so the thing would not hear the shape of a voice. "You have spent your whole life on the wrong side of this. You keep the hurt one breathing. Down here. That is how the hurt one gets everyone killed. I told you at the gate. You want to hold me together till dawn and carry me out, and you cannot, and you know you cannot, and while you try, that thing finds the soft board and comes through it and takes every last one of you. I am spent, so let me spend right." He turned his pale eyes toward the shuttered window, toward the slow circling. "It comes to blood, and it comes to noise. I have both to give, and none of you can spare either. I am going to walk out of here bleeding and singing, and I am going to go up the high rock away from you, and it is going to follow the loudest thing in the hollow, the way it always has. You are going to be quiet, and you are going to let me. That is the last order the gatekeeper gives. You do not go to the bleeding man. You have known it since the gate. Tonight you obey it. I had no argument. That was the horror of it, a different kind than the thing at the wall. The horror of a man handing me a truth I had spent my life refusing, and being right to hand it to me. Everything I was built to do said hold him, save him. Everything the Hollow had taught me in a week said the old man was the only card we had, and he was choosing to play himself. Both were true. Only one got the rest of us to mourning. Silas dragged himself over on his broken leg without a sound and took Hiram's other hand. The two old mountain men, the gatekeeper and the guide, looked at each other in the dying orange light. Something went between them, older than me, older than the company, older than the coal. Silas did not argue either. He knew the rule as deep as Hiram did. What Silas did was start, low, under his breath, to sing. It was the hymn. The one I had half heard Hiram singing at the gate the first day, the old thing in the cadence older than any hymn I knew. Silas gave it to Hiram low, a few bars, teaching it back to the dying man, or reminding him. Hiram's cracked lips began to move with it. I understood this was a thing their people had, a song for exactly this, for the walking out that does not come back, and that it had been sung in that hollow before, more than once. Across the long years the gate had stood, a gatekeeper's hymn, the song for the one whose turn it is to be the bait, so the settlement lives. We got him to his feet. God help me, I helped the dying man to his feet so he could go out and die harder. I cut the wrap loose from his arm at his word and opened a vein for him, a clean draw, because he asked, and his own hands shook too badly. I have opened a great many bodies to save them. That was the only time I ever opened one to spend it. I did it as clean and kind as I knew how. The dart came up out of his arm and ran off his fingers to the floorboards, and the smell of it went into the room, and out beyond the wall the slow circling stopped. The thing had smelled the bell begin to ring. Reese eased the bar off the door, silent. He stood at that door in the dark with a dying old man's blood on the floor and a monster on the other side. He held it steady. He did not break. It is the kind of thing men do that no one ever hears about. Hiram took up the low lantern in his good hand, the last of our light. He looked back at us once. At me and Silas and Reese. At Arthur, frozen and blank against the far wall. At Vance. His pale eyes rested on Vance a moment with something that was not quite forgiveness and not quite a curse. Then old man Hiram opened his mouth and let the hymn come out full. It filled the cabin. After a whole night of held silence, it was enormous. It went out through the open door into the hollow like a light, and Reese swung the door, and Hiram walked out into the dark, upright, bleeding, singing. The lantern held high in his ruined arm. He turned away from the cabin and started up the high rock, and the thing came for the noise and the blood the way water goes downhill. We shut the door and barred it and stood in the full dark now, no light at all, and listened to the old man walk away from us singing. We could follow the whole of it by the hymn. Steady at first, climbing, the voice going up the rock, the circling gone from our walls entirely, all of it drawn off after him, the hymn getting fainter and higher and never once breaking, never faltering into a scream or a plea, an old man walking to his death and giving it a song the whole way, so the thing that hunts by sound would have nothing to listen to but him. I have heard brave things in my life. I have not heard anything to set beside that, a voice going up a black mountain in the dark, holding a tune with its last blood, so the people behind it could live. The hymn went a long way up, farther than I thought a spent man could climb. Then, high up on the ridge, at the edge of hearing, the singing changed, just for a moment, one note that was not a note. And the hymn stopped. Not trailed off. Stopped. The way Billy's splashing had stopped. All at once. A few seconds after, up on the high rock, the lantern light we could just see as a far orange smear through the knife edge of the shutter went out. The hollow was completely dark and completely silent. Old man Hiram had done the rest. Nobody in that cabin made a sound. We sat in the dark and did not weep and did not speak, because the thing was up on the high rock now with what it had followed there, and sound was still death, and grief would have to wait for the light. So we gave the bravest man I ever knew the only tribute the hollow allowed, which was silence, the same silence he had bought us. We sat in it until the gray came up in the crack of the shutter, and the birds that had fled 100 years ago did not sing, because there were no birds, and dawn in that place came in quiet as everything else. It did not come back down for us. That was Hiram's gift, and I do not fully understand the mechanism of it, and I have stopped trying. Maybe it fed and was slow. Maybe the blood at the top of the ridge, in the high rock, the far dry ground away from the water, was enough, and it did not need to come back to the creek. Maybe the rule is more tangled than any of us knew, and an old man's willing blood in the right high place bought something a murder-stolen blood in the water could not. Silas would have a word for it. I only have the fact. When the light came up, the thing was gone up the ridge, and the way down to the gate was open, and we were alive, the 5 of us, because the 6th had made himself into the bait on purpose and walked off singing. We went down at first light. We did not take the creek trail. We took the high rock down as far as it went, and dropped to the creek only where the hollow widened and the walls fell back and the water spread out shallow and slow. In the gray morning it gave back a little of the sky again. I do not know why the widening made a difference. Maybe nothing does that far from the neck. But every man among us breathed easier where the black water thinned, and we did not talk about it, the way men keep quiet walking out of a place like that. The creek trail was down there. We had to cross it to reach the gate, and I made the others wait while Reese and I went ahead to look. I did not want Silas to see it on his brother's mountain. I did not want to look at it myself with an audience. We found where the company men had gone. There was not much to recover. What the thing did to a body was the same every time. The chest levered open from the inside. The cage emptied, a signature as consistent as any I ever saw a killer leave. I understood then why the crew's one recovered body had driven a whole company to invent the phrase animal attack rather than say what the picture said. Some things the mind will do a great deal to avoid naming. I have a list. I added to it that morning. Then I covered what we found as best I could, and went back and told the others there was nothing to see. Silas looked at me and knew I was lying, and let me lie, which is its own kind of mercy between 2 men. We reached the gate near mid-morning. It stood open the way we had left it, the cut chains in the mud, the iron posts stained down one side with the old man's dried blood, black now like everything else in that hollow. Dead Creek ran through the neck under it. I made myself look at the water as we passed, and it ran clear and ordinary over its black stones, giving back the gray sky. An ordinary mountain creek. Nothing about it showed what it had swallowed, or what it had rung the bell for. That was the last thing the hollow taught me, and the one I have carried worst. The water does not look like anything. It just remembers, and waits, and gives back the sky. Past the gate, the birds came back. Not right away. 100 yards down, on the outside of the iron, I heard a single call answer itself, then another. The ordinary sound of a living forest came up around us piece by piece, the way it had gone away going in. I have never been so undone by anything as ordinary as birdsong. Billy should have heard it. That was the thought that came, unbidden, the way the list comes. Billy, 22, who stayed at the tail with the wounded man when the capable men ran, should have walked out under the birdsong. He did not. Old man Hiram did not. The company men did not. Eli, a year gone, did not. And the arithmetic of who walks out under the birds and who does not has never once, in my experience, had anything to do with who deserved to. The reckoning with Vance happened at the gate. I will tell it plain, because it is the part where I had a choice and had to be a certain kind of man about it, and I am not sure to this day I was the right kind. Silas stopped at the iron. He turned. He looked at Vance. You are not going to walk out of here, the grateful survivor, a second time. He said it flat and quiet and final, the way he said everything true. 2 crews you have walked out of, the only man breathing. You cut my brother's throat. You cut all their throats, for whatever is in the ground back there that you thought was worth it. Then you opened them up to look like the thing, and you rang a bell you did not believe in, and you woke it up. Every death in this hollow sense, my brother and those men and that boy and that old man, is a debt that starts at your knife. He held no weapon. He did not need one. I know it. The doctor knows it. You are going to walk out of this gate in front of us with your hands where we can see them, and you are going to be handed to the law, and you are going to say whatever you are going to say. But you are not going to be grateful, and you are not going to be believed, not by the men who were in that cabin. That is the one thing I can take from you, the story. You do not get the story anymore. Vance, who was better at being a person than most people, looked at Silas than at me. I watched him run the arithmetic behind his good, tired face, watched him weigh whether the performance was worth continuing in front of the two men who had seen through it, watched him decide it was not and set it down. And what was under it when he set it down was the most ordinary thing in the world, and that was the worst of all. There was no monster under Vance. There was just a man who had wanted a thing enough to kill for it, and had never once, in any hour of it, felt the weight I had spent my life feeling for the men I could not save. The list I carried, the stone in my boot, the thing that made me a doctor and a wreck at once. Vance simply did not have it. Where it should have been, there was nothing. A clean, empty chest, opened and hollowed a long time before the hollow ever got to him. You cannot prove any of it, Vance said, and he was right. That was the thing. He said it not as a threat, but as a simple observation, almost gentle, a man pointing out the weather. A knife wound in bodies, a bear tore apart, in a hollow with no witnesses and no chain of evidence. A company that would rather have an animal attack and a settlement than a murder trial and a scandal. Lawyers who bill more in a day than that boy made in a year. You know how this goes. You have worked for them longer than I have. He looked at me on the last part. It landed. It was true. I had worked for them longer than he had, and I knew exactly how it went. I had the map. Still, folded small against my chest where I had put it in the cruise camp, the torn circle, and the word and his initials. For one moment, standing at the gate, I thought about it. Then I understood it was worth nothing. It proved a man had found a vein and written his name by it. It did not prove a knife. In a courtroom run by the company's lawyers, it was not evidence of murder. It was a mineral claim. It might even help him. I left it against my chest and said nothing about it. And that was the moment I truly believed Silas, that the only thing any of us could take from Vance was the story, because the law was going to give him everything else. We handed him to the law anyway. There was law at the trailhead by then, and company men, and Delacroix pale and clean, and already on the phone. There were more words spoken about legal access and personnel recovery and animal attack. Vance was put in handcuffs. I stood in the ordinary parking lot with birdsong in the trees, and saw the cleanest killer I ever met walk to a vehicle with his hands behind him. And I knew, the way I know a wound is mortal by the color of the blood, that Silas was right and Vance was right, both. The story was taken from him. The cell never would be. The company needed the animal attack. A murder trial meant discovery. Discovery meant the crew's findings. The findings meant whatever was in the ground back there, that 6 men and a boy and an old man had died over. No lawyer alive was going to let that hollow be opened again in a courtroom. Vance would be out inside a year. He knew it, walking to the vehicle. He did not smile. He did not need to. He just went. Ordinary, grateful face for the cameras. The survivor. Arthur left medicine. I did not have to tell anyone what Arthur had done. That is the thing about the worst kinds of guilt. They do not need a witness. Arthur had spent a decade keeping a ledger against me, being right, being cold, being half a step behind, and gracious about it. And in one night, in that hollow, the ledger came due and showed him what was in his own chest. The same clean nothing that was in Vance, dressed up in 20 years of discipline and prettier sutures. He had run and left men to be opened. He had chosen the trail that killed them to be right against me one last time. And, unlike Vance, Arthur had the weight. That was the difference between them and the thing that finished him. Vance could do what he did because he felt nothing. Arthur did what he did and felt all of it. The whole crushing arithmetic of the man he actually was, under the man he had performed. It broke him the way a load breaks a beam that was rotten at the core the whole time and only looked like it was holding. He turned in his contract. He does not practice. The last I heard, he was doing something with numbers in an office where no one bleeds, which is, I think, the only room left where his ledger cannot hurt anyone. I have not spoken to him since the gate. I do not expect to. I do not hate him, which surprises me. I think the reason I do not hate him is that I understood him, and understanding is a poor substitute for forgiveness, but it is what I have. I stayed. I did not go back to the company. I finished nothing with them cleanly, took no more of their money, signed whatever made them leave me alone, and I stayed on that mountain. Silas was going home to a settlement that had lost its gatekeeper and its guide's brother in the same bad season. And I carry a list, and I have learned to know the one place in a life where the count might for once go down instead of up. I helped where a doctor helps in country like that, which is everywhere, because there is no doctor for 40 miles, and there are old people and young ones, and men who do dangerous work in the ground. I set bones and stitched cuts and sat with the dying. Slowly the list stopped being the only thing I heard when the heater ticked at 0300. I found Billy's mother too, in a low house, at the end of a bad road. I told her that her son stayed at the back with the wounded when the strong men ran, and that at the end he was not afraid. I did the medicine for her that Billy had gone into that hollow to pay for, and I did it for nothing, for as long as she had, which was not long. She kept a picture of him on the wall by the stove, in his security uniform, grinning, too young for it. She asked me once, near the end, whether it had been quick. I told her yes. It was the second time I lied to spare someone that season, and I did not count either lie against myself, because some lies are the last kindness a doctor has left in the bag. It did not balance anything. Nothing balances. But it was on the right side of the ledger, and it was the first thing in a long while that was. Silas's leg healed crooked, and he walks on it wrong to spare it, the way I walk wrong to spare the stone in my boot. We do not talk much about the hollow. For a long time we did not go back up to the gate. When we finally did, we went together, and neither of us said out loud that neither of us would have gone alone. We rebuilt the gate, in the end. That was the one thing the settlement asked of the two of us who had been inside. We did it together, over a hard autumn. New chain, new lock. The old iron shored back into the living rock. Silas taught me the pact the way it is really taught, which is not as a story but as a set of chores, a maintenance, a thing done to the gate and the water and the ground, every season for the rest of a life. I do it now. I did not used to be the kind of man who would. I am now. I would like to be able to end it there. The gate holding, the water forgetting. The thing old man Hiram walked up the high rock, dead in the high rock, spent on an old man's willing blood, and the hollow gone quiet the way it should be quiet. The bird song at the trailhead. The crooked-legged man and the doctor who learned to subtract. That is how it should have ended. It is not how it ended. A year after we walked out, Silas and I went up to check the gate. It was autumn again, the same low-gray light, the same coins of it coming down through the canopy. We walked up the hollow the way I had walked it the first day. The birds thinned as we climbed, the way they always had. We did not talk. We reached the neck, and the iron and the black water running through it, and we did our chores. The chain, the lock, the ground, the old maintenance. It was ordinary. I had almost let myself believe the whole thing had gone quiet. Then Silas went still, the way he did, and he was looking down at the mud by the base of the iron post, at the edge of the water. I came up beside him and looked where he was looking. There was a print in the coal-black mud, a paw print, 4 toes and the pad, canned, pressed clean and fresh into the wet ground at the water's edge, where a thing had come to drink or to listen, and it was small. That was what took the ground out from under me, the way the trail camera frame had, a full year later, standing at the rebuilt gate with the chore still on my hands. It was small, no bigger than the palm of my hand, the print of a thing that was young, born recently, growing, up in that hollow, on the deep side of the iron we had just so carefully locked. Silas did not say anything. He crouched, slow, on his crooked leg, and looked at the small print a long time. I stood over him and looked at it too, and the thing neither of us said out loud was the thing we both understood at once. It had not been alone up there, or it had not stayed alone. Whatever Hiram walked up the high rock a year ago, whatever fed on his willing blood in the far dry ground, the blood in the water, the blood in the soil, the broken pact, and the long open gate, all of it had bought the hollow more than a season of hunger. It had bought it a generation. The thing had gotten in whatever it needed to get in, and the hollow had done what a thirsty country does when it is finally given enough, and there was a young one now, small-pawed, growing, on the wrong side of the gate. Then, from far up the high rock, up where the old man's hymn had cut short a year before, a howl came down through the hemlocks. It was high, thin, young, the howl of a thing that had not finished growing into its voice, a juvenile note, almost, God help me, playful. It went up and out over the hollow and hung there, and before it finished, from somewhere else on the ridge, somewhere lower and closer and far larger, a second sound answered it. Not a howl, a long, low, rumbling exhalation, vast, patient, the sound of a great chest emptying slow, the sound I had felt in the water of my own body at the gate a year before, when the first one came down. It answered the young one's high call, the way an old thing answers a young thing it is raising. The two of them, the high, thin voice and the low, vast breath, sounded once across the hollow together, then went quiet. Silas stood up off his crooked leg. He looked at me. His flat gray eyes held something I had not seen before, not even in the worst of it. It took me a moment to name it. When I named it, the coal went all the way down me, the way it had at the creek the first day. It was not fear, it was not grief. It was the look of a man who has finally understood the size of a thing he has spent his whole life guarding a gate against, and understood that the gate was never the point, that the gate was only ever a thing men built to feel like they had a border, and that the hollow does not recognize borders, and never did. We built the gate on the wrong assumption, Silas said, quiet. We built it to keep it in. He did not finish it. He did not have to. We stood at the iron we had just locked, the old maintenance still black on our hands, and looked down at the small fresh print at the edge of the water, and up at the high rock where the two voices had answered each other. The thing neither of us said was that the gate had never divided a safe side from a hunted one. There was no safe side. There had not been a safe side since the first blood went into the water, maybe long before that, maybe since before any man stacked the first stone. The gate had a deep side and a near side. We had always told ourselves we lived on the near one. The small print in the mud was on the near side of the iron, at the edge of the water we drank from. And the water runs downhill out of that hollow the way water does, down past the gate, down past the settlement, down to every creek and well and low green place where the living keep their warm bodies and their blood going around and around in its little bell. We locked the gate. I do not know why we bothered. We locked it and did our chores, and walked down out of the hollow in the gray light with the birds coming back around us, piece by piece. Behind us and above us, the hollow held its two voices and its small fresh print and its thirsty ground, and gave back nothing, and waited. Silas and I still go up and check the gate. We will go up as long as we are able. Every season the chores take a little longer, and every season I look at the mud at the base of the iron post before I look at anything else. Some seasons there is nothing there. Some seasons there is a print, and each time the print is bigger than the last.